Hi guys, Chris with Microsoft here with another exciting episode of What's New in Windows Server 2012. Alright, so tonight we're continuing in a segment we've been covering on storage, and we're going to talk about one of our new features added into Windows Server 2012 called data optimization, or more commonly referred to as data deduplication. This is part of the file and storage services piece. So we're going to go in here, role base config, we're going to pick MS2, that's the server I'm working on. We're going to expand out, we're going to look into file and iSCSI services, and you're going to see a little checkbox here for data deduplication. So checking this will also add file server role. I'm going to click next and go ahead and kick that off. If necessary, we'll go ahead and restart the destination server. This role I don't believe actually requires that. So if you're not familiar with data deduplication, there's actually several different ways you can optimize and save space in a file system. One of the things that you've heard maybe before is single instance storage. That would be similar files, or the same file rather, with the same name, same size, same modified date, will be eliminated because there's no sense in keeping multiple copies of that same file. We saw this in some previous versions of Exchange Server. So I send you an email with an attachment. It's going to be in my sent items in your inbox. Well, that message gets bifurcated in the database in some of the older versions of Exchange, where you really don't have to have multiple copies of that same exact file. You can save a little space that way. SANs can do data deduplication. They're usually block level, but this is actually working at the chunk level. So these are variable size chunks, anywhere from 32K up to 128K. These are going to be changing the way the file works. Most files have a single unnamed data stream, and then the head of the file contains metadata. And what's going to happen is it's going to identify chunks of data that are similar inside of the actual payload, or the unnamed data stream. Move those into the chunk store. The chunk store is actually part of system volume information. And I'll show that to you here in a little bit. But before we actually get that deep, we need to actually turn on the data deduplication. But what's important to understand is that files aren't going to be stored on a volume that is enabled for deduplication as independent streams anymore. They're replaced with stubs that point to data blocks. Think of custom reparse points. The data blocks are just in a chunk store that's in system vol, information in the root of the drive. This is per volume. There is no database per se that actually talks about what files have been deduplicated. Because we're just using common reparse points, these part of NTFS, it's just part of the way NTFS works. Even if I lose the operating system, if C drive were to become obliterated and I had to completely reload the operating system, when a new version of the OS is reloaded and we come back, the deduped drive that's been enabled for this is going to not lose any of that deduplication because the operating system still understands it. Now, to continue to dedupe that drive, we're going to have to put this feature that I just installed back on and reconfigure it. But we won't actually lose the data. The other cool thing about just using this method of deduping files is you're going to back up optimized, and you're going to restore optimized. Another thing that's interesting is that when we move these into the system volume information folder, which is really hard to see, by the way, I can go ahead and view and then say hide protected OS files. The system volume information, oops, I need to also show hidden files. This folder is a special protected folder that will have things like VSS in it, and a handful of other technologies keep their stuff here. Oops. Because we're just using standard NTFS, though, it's going to be able to recover from any kind of a disaster. Those chunks that are being stored in the system volume information are also going to be compressed for further optimization. Now, before I get any further, I have to give props to my very close friend and colleague Brent Caskey, who assisted me with the build out of the entire storage module and everything that we've talked about, from the iSCSI targets and storage management and now data deduplication. He's helped me tremendously out with all of this. He's been a great help over the years in a lot of different projects. But this is a lab that he actually created in a project that two of us worked on. So anyway, what I want to do is take some of these files that Brent created for me and look at their size. So we've got a size and we've got a size on disk, and they're about identical right now. And if we were to look at these files themselves, there are really not a lot in here. They're just kind of empty files, but they are taking up disk space. All of them, however, are pretty much the same as far as what's in them. So this is a perfect example of a great deduplication scenario where we could save a lot of space. Where you have a lot of user documents, you're going to get a lot of duplicated data, and user documents is really the focus on this deduplication thing. All right, so we're going to be looking at the disks. These are all our little volumes here, and I should look at the volumes actually. We have this name deduplication. That doesn't make it actually deduplicated at this point in time. What does that is we just right click on a volume, and we're going to configure data deduplication at the volume level. So we're going to get some questions that it's going to ask us here. So we just enable data dedupe. How we set this up is up to our business needs. So deduplicate files that are older in days than, let's say, in our case, 1 maybe. We could exclude files. You can use wildcards, and you can use different extensions. Like I could say, don't do MDBs, and don't do maybe Excel files or something like that. So those would be our exclude field filters that say do not deduplicate those. We could also exclude folders, even though we are enabling this at the deduplication is at the volume level. I could actually exclude a folder from being deduplicated inside of that. So if I had maybe some databases or some virtual machine VHDs, which really wouldn't be a good target, database files wouldn't be a really good target for deduplication. I also can set the deduplication schedule. So how often do I want this task to run? And there's several different sections to this. So enable the background optimization, enable throughput optimization, and when we're going to do it. Creating a second schedule for throughput optimization. Oops, goodness. Which, as you can see from the description, during this specified period of time, we would run data dedupe at a normal priority and consume the resources required to maximize the performance, whereas anything else would be going with background optimization. By default, we have background optimization turned on. So we're going to go ahead and accept the defaults for this here. Let's see if I can get it where it'll appear on the screen properly. This is another example of when I'm going to have to actually change the screen resolution to be able to get this on where it'll all fit. So, deduplication schedule, looking for the OK button here, which is difficult to do when we're not in the 1024 by 768. People don't typically run at 800 by 600, but I'm doing that to make your YouTube video. Oops, wrong button. List all modes. I'm doing this to make the YouTube experience just a little easier for folks. So there we go. So paused the video and I pulled that over to 1024 by 768. Now we're jumping back. All right, so now we have enabled deduplication for our Z drive, and going to our wizard here, we click OK. So this is done. We go back to Server Manager. We're going to see that the deduplication rate is currently at 0%. Well, that's because we haven't actually done anything with this yet. This will happen automatically, so patience counts. But for those of us who are not terribly patient, we could Windows key X, and then we could go into G, hot accelerator key for computer management, and then I can go into the task scheduler, because that's where all this came up. So nothing terribly complex about anything we've seen so far, I think you'd agree, right? We're using reparse points, we're using standard NTFS type of parameters to make these files deduplicated, and the jobs themselves are going to sit inside of task scheduler, so no reason to reinvent the wheel, if you will, just so we can accomplish this task. But anyway, so we're going to find this little folder called Deduplication. We're going to find that 3 tasks got created. So those are the same things that we saw in the wizards. We've got a couple of things that we can see here: the background optimization, weekly garbage collection, and the weekly scrubbing. Alright, so and we can tell by reading through, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off the panes, get ourselves a little bit of screen real estate here. So you can see I've turned off the console tree and the action pane so that I can see this a little better. And just reading the descriptions here, this runs the data duplication garbage collection on all the volumes. The weekly scrubbing runs the deduplication across the volumes. The background optimization, that's what we want it to get to run right now so that we can actually get this thing to kick off. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this off. I'm going to get this thing running its optimization right here and let it go out and see if it can save some space on that volume. So the other 2 jobs that are listed here is the scrubbing. So data dedupe has a built-in data integrity type feature. It does things like checksum validation. It does metadata consistency checking. It's got built-in redundancy for metadata. Really popular chunks. If you had a chunk that actually links to, say, 70 different files, well, the loss of that one chunk would lose 70 files. So it's more of a ratio where it's looking to find really popular chunks and then create additional copies, so the loss or corruption of one chunk doesn't cause us to lose all of those files. As long as we've got a couple of chunk copies, then we can always pull it from the other copy, and so it's got the capability to pull that back. So it runs a data integrity scrub every once in a while, as you can see by default once a week. Garbage collection, on the other hand, this weekly garbage collection that's running is a job that processes the deletion or modification of any data on the volume. So the data chunks that just aren't referencing anything anymore get deleted. So it's just a kind of a cleanup process. And these 3 seem to manage the whole process fairly well. If I jump back over here and look at DD again and look at some of these files, right-clicking and go to Properties, you can see that we've gone from being meg on the size to size on disk being a mere 4K. And if I were to go through and look at these other files, I'd see similarities across the board on all of that. And that, in essence, is how the deduplication bits work on Windows Server 2012. And again, personally, I find this to be a good positioning for third-tier type storage, your user's documents. This isn't something that I would really be positioning personally for a customer to go out and try to dedupe their VHDX files on their virtual machines or their SQL databases. Really, this is really for deduping to files, right? So that would be my personal recommendation for how you would use this technology. But however you end up using it, or whatever interesting things you find with this, hopefully you can get some savings. I don't think you're going to get to the deduplication rate that we're about to see right here after I do this refresh, which should be fairly substantial. Alright, so we've deduped down to 7%, so that's pretty cool. Well, that's because all these files were actually identical, right? So that's a pretty good savings over what how much savings we've actually pulled off of a folder that had let's see here, folder that had how much data. Let's take a look at it there. Yeah, so 97.6. We've saved 97.7 megs. So, well, that's because these files are the extreme example, right? And it's always fun to play with this stuff and give you an idea of what could happen. But anyway, after the refresh, we can see that it has actually turned on and it's running, and those tasks are where we would actually control this thing. So that kind of brings us to the end of the episode here. So anyway, guys, this has been Chris with Microsoft, and as always, I really appreciate you watching. If you did find anything about this useful or interesting, please take a second and give it a quick like and the little thumbs up link below, and feel free to subscribe to my channel. Also, my blog is at 9z.com. It's real easy to remember. It's just the last number and the last letter .com. That's got links to my Facebook, my LinkedIn, my Twitter. So again, thanks a ton for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.